Today we will look at another very well-known poem from the Song dynasty by Wang Anshi, the gigantic figure in the history of North Song, a poet and a prominent politician born exactly 1,000 years ago. Under a young and ambitious emperor at that time, Wang Anshi reached the highest rank of something like a prime minister and launched his grand reform scheme. Although the reform was mostly positive and did bring some wealth and prosperity to the country, it was also highly controversial at the time, and Wang Anshi made a lot of enemies. There were also many episodes of ups and downs as he was demoted and re-promoted again, etc. Because this is such a significant event in the history and overshadowed many aspects of life at that time, that even as a poet, Wang Anshi's works are often seen under the light of his political career. For example, we have learned two of his poems. One is 元日，爆竹声中一岁除，春风送暖入屠苏，千门万户曈曈日，总把新桃换旧符. The poem was a celebration of the new year, but it was also a reflection of the Wang Anshi's ambition as he was prepared to set out his reforms. We have also learned his 梅花 poem. 墙角数枝梅，凌寒独自开。遥知不是雪，为有暗香来. It's a poem to describe the plum blossom, but we know that this poem was written after Wang Anshi was demoted, and he was really expressing his fortitude and perseverance. After Wang Anshi first became the prime minister, and after a few years of reform, he was demoted, and then he was called upon again to retake the same position with a lot of politics in the background. But shortly after, he was demoted once more, and eventually, in a few years' time, retired back to his home in the current-day Nanjing, never to return to the frontline politics again. The poem we are going to learn today was possibly written between when he was first demoted and when he retook the position of the prime minister, when he was on his way to the capital. I said possibly because there are different views on this, and we don't know for sure on what exact occasion Wang Anshi wrote this poem. The title is 泊船瓜洲. 泊 means to dock. Travelers, when going by boat, would stop by some port to spend the night on their journey, and this is called 泊. We have seen this character a couple of times. We have from 杜甫门泊东吴万里船. Boats from thousands of miles away are docked in front of my house. We have the poem 枫桥夜泊 by 张继, mooring at night at Maple Bridge. 船 means boat, and Guazhou is a place on the north bank of the Yangtze River near Nanjing. We have another name of a place in the poem. It's Jinkou, which is the current-day Zhenjiang, on the south bank of the Yangtze River. At the time of Wang Anshi, Jinkou was a very important city. Now here is a map. As you can see, this is Guazhou, where Wang Anshi was when traveling stopped by. And this is Jinkou, the current-day Zhenjiang, opposite Guazhou on the Yangtze River. As a reference, the capital of North Song, Bei Song, is current-day Kaifeng, which is here. It's quite hard to see, but somewhere here. Let's first read the poem together. 京口瓜洲一水间，中山只隔数重山。春风又绿江南岸，明月何时照我还? We already talked about 京口 and 瓜洲. And 一水 here means the Yangtze River, one water. 间 is between. So this line is saying the towns of Jinkou and Guazhou were separated by just a river. Guazhou was where Wang Anshi was, and Jinkou was an important port. Then the next line, 中山只隔数重山. 中山 is a mountain in Nanjing, here on the map. So this is Nanjing. If you see on the big map, this is Nanjing and this is Guazhou and Jinkou, which is not too far. And Nanjing was the home of Wang Anshi. 只 means only. 隔 means to separate. 树 means several. 重 means layer. 山 is mountain. At the place where Wang Anshi was, there were a lot of mountains, but his hometown was not far from here. Zhongshan, the landmark of his hometown, was only separated by a few layers of mountains from Guazhou. These first two lines are in fact quite pedantic. Wang Anshi was just detailing where he was physically, using quite a few names of places, like Jinkou, Guazhou, and Zhongshan. The next two lines are the highlight of the poem. Like many famous lines of ancient Chinese poetry, the language is extremely simple. 春风, spring breeze. 右 is again. 绿 means green. 江南 means the south of the river. An means riverbank. And the 明月 means the bright moon. 何 means what. 时 means time. So 何时 means when, what time. 照 means to shine upon. 我 means I, or me, myself. 还 means to return, and to return home in particular. It's all very straightforward. These two lines say, the spring breeze has once more turned the south of the riverbank green. And when can I return home with the bright moon shining upon me? This clearly showed his keen wish to go back home, a sentiment often experienced when traveling by oneself. I mentioned before that there are a number of different views in terms of when this poem was composed. But whatever the occasion was, and if we think about Wang Anshi's life, it would be pretty obvious that he wished he could accomplish what he set out to do, the reform. And once that was achieved, he could go back home with a satisfied heart. So although the theme of missing home was very common in poetry, and often associated with a sense of sadness, here it doesn't feel that way. 春风又绿江南岸. What does it imply? The spring is here. Grass has grown again. This is about the new beginning, something to look forward to. So even though this poem was largely about expression of some missing thoughts towards hometown, the green color, the reference to the spring, adds a lot of optimism and gives a sense of hope and joy. And this thought of missing home has become a beautiful longing and wish. Throughout the history of poetry, up to early Tang, poets usually rely on their instincts and spontaneous ideas to write poems. They didn't normally spend long time comparing and choosing and perfecting their language to find the best and most suitable characters in poems. For instance, if we take Li Bai as an example, when we read his poem, we can feel that most of them feel like being improvised, that Li Bai probably thought of something and just wrote it down as he went along, like 赠汪伦. 桃花潭水深千尺，不及汪伦送我情. It's all very spontaneous. And he wouldn't change anything afterwards. We could easily pick up his poems and find places where we could argue if here and there we use some other characters, they might also work, or even better. Although the genius of Li Bai in terms of writing up a whole poem is not disputable at all, at times we could argue the use of certain characters might still be improved. In comparison, the same can't be said of Du Fu, who adopted a completely different style, in that he had to spend a long time thinking about all aspects of his poems, and especially the choice of words. He had to ponder upon his works over and over again, on this and that occasion, which exact character was the most appropriate and should be used, etc. So the outcome from this exercise was almost impeccable. This is called 练字. Okay. 练 means to make iron, to forge metals. So 练字 means to forge words as if forging metals, to show how much hard work is needed. This tradition was greatly exemplified by later poets, and the Song poets were great admirers of Du Fu, so they ardently followed him. Wang Anshi was no exception. We now know that when he first wrote this poem, the third line was not like this. It was 春风又到江南岸. The spring breeze once more reached the south bank of the river. But he wasn't very satisfied with this thought. He thought there must be a better alternative. Then he changed to 过，春风又过江南岸 to pass. And then to 入，春风又入江南岸 Spring breeze entered 江南岸 And then to 满 to fill. The spring breeze filled 江南岸 etc. On their own, all these characters work in the poem, essentially delivering the same meaning, but from a different angle. But Wang Anshu was still unhappy about them. In the end, he found this 绿 and was really satisfied that this was indeed the best choice. With a hint of color, suddenly the poem becomes more vivid and lively. Now that we've seen this, it's obvious the use of 绿 is a fantastic choice, and it shows what a fine poet Wang Anshu was. We know about this because apparently his original writing was somehow preserved, which showed that he changed and took out characters from this position many, many times, adding comments such as no good, until he found this 绿. Do you like the use of this 绿? That's all. Thank you.